Welcome to JGTCR, I'm Cope, and today we are tuning the BAC Mono. Let's get into it. This is a very interesting vehicle to drive. It has an oversized go-kart feel with much more power, and it seems that people either love this or hate this, as opinions are quite divided when it comes to this car. The handling is decent, but not without its flaws. It can easily go from steering well to understeer in the blink of an eye. This can also occur while sliding, making an absolute mess of any steering control we have and pushing us off our race line. These four-wheel drifts with no steering control are not fun at all and carve huge chunks away from our lap times. The tail end of the Mono is slippery, but in a good way. The slides are generally controllable and fun, but they do slow us down quite a bit. The power delivery is considerably aggressive. This is due mainly to the weight of the vehicle, but it is something we must become accustomed to. As it stands, this vehicle provides an intermediate class in throttle control. And lucky for us, it's easy to get an A+, or at least a passing grade. The brakes are solid and slows us down very well with no erratic movements. But if there were any real complaints about the Mono, it would probably be that it could use an extra gear, as it seems to run out of puff in the top end. Let's jump ahead and collect our time. 7 minutes 5.9 seconds. Let's get tuning. For this tune, we very much had to find a balance between fixing the oversteer and fixing the understeer. This was also made more difficult by our downforce settings being fixed. Tackling our understeer issue, our body height adjustment is lower at the front than it is at the rear, and our anti-roll bar is also softer at the front than it is at the rear. In addition to this, we also increased our negative camber angle to 4.0 and also increased our toe angle to 0.10. And to deal with our oversteer issues, our differential settings were made rather weak. But once again, our ballast is the saving grace, with 45 kilos being set at a ballast positioning of 25. Let's see it in action on the Nürburgring. When completely tuned and modified, the BAC Mono is much more rapid and handles a lot better. The tail end is a touch more loose than factory, but it is grounded when it does slide. The extra ballast over the rear wheels does a stellar job of making sure that power makes its way to the ground as efficiently as possible. However, it is still up to us to use throttle modulation to make sure things go as smoothly as possible. The handling is more sharp and crisp than the factory model. However, we did choose to prioritize the oversteer, which means understeer is still a factor, but we made our choice and firmly stand by it. The handling that we do have available to us is more than enough to get us around the track quickly and comfortably. And finally, our braking remains solid with no real issues to report. Let's jump ahead and collect our time. 6 minutes 27.5 seconds. Let's take a look at the drift tune. We made a few adjustments to get the Mono to drift, but the most drastic change was to our differential, where every setting was set as low as possible. This was due to the aggressive nature of the tail end. We also increased the ballast to 96 kilos. Again, this was all in the effort to tame the rear end. The rest of our drift setup is par for the course, so dial it in and let's drift Suzuka. The BAC Mono is quite a capable drift car. It may not necessarily look the part, but it does handle drift scenarios rather well. Even with the race tune and only changing to comfort hard tyres, it was more than capable of linking the whole track. However, we wanted to make some improvements. The tail end during drift was a touch too snappy, Tom, so the extra weight over the tail end helped nullify that issue. So now we have a much more fluid experience when we transition from left to right and as we initiate our drift. The drift itself is very kart-like, with the tail end leading the show. This sensation is more prominent at higher RPM, but it can also be felt at lower RPM. The key to drifting smoothly is all in the throttle control. But beware, because danger lurks at both ends of the RPM spectrum. The power delivery is very peaky, and at the top end it can spin us the whole way around, so bouncing off the limiter is not recommended. Adversely, releasing the throttle completely can also spin us right the way around, so as long as we keep this in mind, we're golden. The BAC Mono may divide opinions, but at the end of the day, it does perform. In factory trim, it is basically just a giant go-kart. And while this may not necessarily be everyone's cup of tea, once we wrap our heads around how to drive it, the racing experience comes together. When completely modified and tuned, the ante is upped just a touch. While there is more power made available to us, the secret sauce truly lies in the tune settings. With better handling and more stability, we are far more capable of laying down better track times. And in the drift arena, it is deceptively proficient, albeit with some minor quirks. And that's all we have for you today, so until next time, keep racing!